term 2018, Team Slager PC 741 Petcha Kutchas. And the person who's volunteered to go first is Megan Danielson.
Okay, sharing my screen. My name is Megan Danielson, and I'm a certified nurse midwife at Bronson Women's Service. The title of my quality improvement project is Increasing the Effective and Appropriate Use of Intermittent Auscultation, or IA, to decrease the nulliparous term singleton vertex, or NTSV, cesarean rate. The aim of my project was to increase the percent of low-risk NSV pregnant women appropriately receiving IA during labor to 75% before March 11, 2018. To help with my efforts, I formed a project team consisting of the Patient Safety and Quality Coordinator, who was my site sponsor, a physician in my practice, who was my project mentor, the nurse manager of L&D, our perinatal nurse specialist, the OB staff development instructor, 2 midwives, 3 nurses, and an MFM physician. To engage with staff about IA, I first hosted IA education sessions for nurses and providers. I then held informal IA practice sessions using fetal heart rate recordings from the A1 fetal monitoring course, as well as casual IA Q&A sessions. I also attended staff meetings and incorporated fetal monitoring into shift change huddles. To engage with patients about IA, CNMs provided patients with a labor partnership that included fetal monitoring preferences and an education handout about fetal monitoring. These were provided at the 36-week prenatal visit. In the 3rd PDSA cycle, I also introduced a shared decision-making flow sheet about fetal monitoring and posted reminders for patients in each exam room. To improve screening for candidacy for IA, fetal monitoring decision aids were included in each patient chart to be completed by the nurses upon admission and turned in for tracking. Throughout the project, I tweaked who filled out the form and when, and how the form was put into the chart. To improve the correct documentation of IA, I created index card-sized laminated IA cheat sheets and hung them by the computers in each labor and delivery room. Throughout the project, I made changes such as adding hooks for hanging, making a title page for easier tool identification, and posting reminders to use the tools in the Pyxis where the Dopplers are stored. I predicted that the project would increase the percent of staff engaged in IA training to 80% and increase the mean team confidence and ability to perform IA to 95%. I predicted that it would increase the number of NTSV women who utilized a birth plan to 75%, and that NTSV patients would request IA 75% of the time. I predicted that the project would standardize the screening process to identify candidates for IA correctly 100% of the time, also ensuring that patients who did not qualify for IA did not receive it. I predicted that the process of documenting IA would also be standardized, cueing staff to perform and document IA correctly at least 80% of the time, improving outcomes. While for 3 weeks out of the 8-week project, 100% of candidates for IA received it, the final results were poor, with 0% or 0 of the 3 low-risk NTSV women who birthed during that week receiving IA, and 57% or 4 of the 7 candidates receiving IA the week prior, for a total of 40% in the last PDSA cycle. Team engagement went well, with 96% of staff engaging with education sessions, far surpassing the goal of 80%. And although team confidence and ability to correctly use IA ended at 92%, not quite meeting the goal of 95%, it was an improvement from the baseline of almost 85%. Patient engagement with the use of birth plans had an overall positive shift throughout the project, but decreased at the very end, to end below the goal of 80% of women utilizing a birth plan. Patient requests for IA on birth plans were initially inconsistent, but ended at 100%, above the goal of 75%. Nurse compliance with utilizing a fetal monitoring decision aid to screen all patients for candidacy for IA was not consistent, but did improve at the end of the project, surpassing the goal of utilizing the checklist for 90% of patients. Outside of 2 data collection points, 100% of candidates for IA were correctly identified. Documentation cheat sheets were used consistently throughout the project whenever IA was performed, but the use of the cheat sheets decreased at the end of the project, perhaps as nurses became more comfortable with documentation. IA was documented correctly 100% of the time throughout the project, which was a great improvement from the baseline of 38%. The overall aim of the project was not met. Still, team engagement on IA and subsequent team confidence and ability to perform IA increased. Patient use of birth plans demonstrated a positive shift, and documented requests for IA increased. The desired outcomes of correctly identifying candidates for IA and correctly documenting IA were both achieved. I learned that increasing dialogue about fetal monitoring and improving staff confidence with IA did not affect the rate of IA utilization. Increased patient requests for IA also did not have an effect, and neither did tools that standardized the screening and documentation processes. Some nursing staff members were resistant to the change, stating nothing we did could change their opinions. The impact of the project was somewhat minimal, as the aim was not met and the cesarean rate for NTSB women changed minimally. However, the project did increase patient safety, as the tools led to no high-risk patients receiving IA inappropriately, and IA was consistently documented correctly. Other health systems could implement the screening and documentation tools to improve patient safety. Although the aim was not met, staff confidence, patient engagement with fetal monitoring, and patient safety all increased. To sustain the project, nurse management will need to continue discussing fetal monitoring through huddles and education sessions, and continue utilizing the tools introduced. Sustaining the project in these ways may shift the culture and lead to achievement of the aim over time. I learned that a project will not be successful without buy-in from the team. Making a change within a large system of over 100 team members was difficult, and although staff would engage and say they were supportive of the project, if I was not physically present, it often did not happen. I think the measures of identifying the proper form of fetal monitoring and properly documenting IA were achieved because team members could see the necessity of doing these things for patient safety, whereas the argument for performing IA over unnecessary continuous monitoring to decrease the C-section rate seemed less urgent. As such, in future QI projects, I will be sure to engage the team early and often and do as much as possible to ensure they understand the reasoning behind the project and why it would lead to quality care. How do I stop sharing here? Stop sharing.
Yay, nice work. You had 6 seconds to spare. So very nice. Great job, Megan.
Thanks.
Love the pictures.
I knew you would. I chose some people you recognize.
Yeah, it made me homesick. Little brat, you. All right. Who'd like to go next?
I will.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So the next person to present is Summer Park.
Summer Park.
Park. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Happens all the time. All right. Can you see it? Everyone can see it okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm ready to start. Hello, I'm Summer Park, here to tell you about my project titled Improving Timely Annular Ocular Exams for Patients with Diabetes in a Primary Care Office. The project was implemented in a family practice department at Christie Clinic. Christie Clinic is a privately owned outpatient clinic located in the heart of Illinois. The majority of our community is made up of a state college called the University of Illinois, and we are surrounded by cornfields. When I approached our administration with my list of 10 ideas for a QI project, diabetic retinopathy ocular exam was listed as number 10 on a list of 10. To say I had zero interest in this topic would be an understatement, and frankly, I thought they would never choose diabetic retinopathy ocular exams as a QI project. But of course, in true administration style, this would be the topic that they chose, and the project I would come to live, eat, and breathe for the next 3 terms. Despite my hesitation, I reminded myself it's about learning the process and not the topic. So I plunged forward and immersed in everything about diabetic retinopathy. The aim of the project became to increase timely dilated annual ocular exams of type 2 diabetes patients in a primary care office to 85% by March of 2018. I sectioned the tests of change into 4 separate ramps. The first ramp A was the team engagement ramp, which occurred at morning huddles. The second, or ramp B, was the patient engagement, which included a checklist. The third, ramp C, was a modification to our EMR system. And finally, the fourth, ramp D, was a log book tracking referrals for eye appointments. Team engagement involved early morning huddle meetings, education about diabetic retinopathy, family feud games, lots of food, and lots of laughter. I think this portion of the project was my favorite and brought me the greatest motivation as I moved forward. For patient engagement, or ramp B, each diabetic patient came in for a routine medication check or physical, received a clipboard, pen, and American Association of Diabetes educator checklist regarding the patient's diabetes lifestyle. Included on the checklist was a question regarding the date of their last annual eye exam. This was meant to prompt the patient into thinking and hopefully initiating discussion with their provider about the eye exam. I also created an educational tool with 3 facts regarding diabetic retinopathy. For ramp C, changes were made in our EMR system, which included use of a diabetic template in order to cue the provider on asking about the patient's last ocular exam. For ramp D, all patients referred and scheduled with the ophthalmology department were logged into a calendar book for tracking purposes. Examining each ramp A through D, predictions were determined on what may happen during the tests of change. Here are the following predictions and the results to the ramps that we implemented. Ramp A, for team engagement, I predicted that the team would initially feel overwhelmed by the project and the idea of increasing their overall confidence and knowledge about diabetic retinopathy. The results were that the team's confidence increased from 28% on the initial survey to 97% by the end of the project. In the patient engagement ramp, or ramp B, I predicted that not all the patients would complete the AADE form provided, and this could limit their overall patient engagement. The results were actually 94% of all patients completed the AADE form and indicated their last eye exam. For those patients who had not completed an annual eye exam, they would state this fact on the form. For the final 2 ramps, C and D, I predicted that the EMR checklist would be implemented at a high completion rate by the provider, and the logbook referrals would initially struggle, but after time improve. The EMR checklist was completed by each provider at a 100% rate, with referrals provided for eye exams at an overall average rate of 75%. Of the 20 patients eligible for an exam and referred, 16 had actual eye appointments completed within the 8-week project cycle. 14 of those patients went to their eye exam, which ended up being an appointment rate of 87%. I was informed at the onset of the project that this type of appointment had a notoriously high no-show rate, so I was pretty excited about that average. Our overall aim of improving our annual diabetic eye exams was 85%. In the chart audit at the beginning of the project, our family practice department had a rate of 48%. We did have ups and downs in the process, but overall our average ended up being at an 86%. What did I learn? First, I learned that all 4 parts of the project were necessary and equally valuable. Each part alone would not have gotten the job done, but I needed all 4 working together as a collective whole. I learned that I have tools and procedures to implement changes in the system, and I know what to do, and if implemented correctly, I can achieve a goal. Lastly, I learned that given the right tools and engagement, people can respond to change. I believe the project impacted our patients, and despite the seemingly small number, as a team, we did improve the health and wellness of those diabetic patients. I believe our team impacted the department and primary care in our clinic as a whole. We proved that we can achieve higher and better evidence-based care for our patients in a short QI project. And finally, we impacted each other and proved that with some confidence, we will make a difference. In conclusion, I'm hopeful that many aspects of the QI project will be sustained long-term in our office and in all of primary care Christie Clinic. We are planning to have routine reviews at our about diabetic retinopathy at our team huddles, planning to continue use of the AADE checklist, and we'll continue the EMR diabetes checklist at patient encounters. We will continue to schedule patient eye referrals at the time of their appointments at the discretion of the provider. As I reflect on the project, I'm reminded that despite the fact that I had zero interest in the topic, it was actually about learning the process. Not only did we change and impact a system, but on a smaller scale, we helped improve overall patient care and outcomes. Life is not always about what we may like or enjoy, but how we navigate the task given. This is a picture of my team. As a collective whole group, I believe that anything is possible. Thank you all for listening to my presentation. Done.
Good job, Summer. You were just about 8 seconds over.
What?
Yeah.
When I practiced, I was like 6 minutes every time.
Yeah, that's okay. But you know, you were very easy to understand. You didn't feel like you were talking super fast. So that's good.
Oh, I'm still screen sharing. I should have went faster.
That's okay.
Sorry. All right.
8 seconds isn't bad. But it is hard, isn't it, to get concise?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you summarize 8 weeks of work in, you know, or 16 weeks or whatever? And every one of us are going to practice saying annual ocular exams.
I
10
know.
times. You might want to think about when you do your final presentation if that's the way you really want to phrase it. I mean, it's up to you, but
Sure.
that's a hard one.
Yes.
So, all right, great.
Okay.
Who's
Cool.
next?
I'll go.
Okay.
Okay, you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, my name is Emily Furch, and this presentation reviews the implementation of universal HIV screening in the primary care setting using patient-centered strategies based on USPSTF guidelines. As a member of the HIV team, we noticed that as advances in HIV treatment continued to develop, there was a lack of focus on preventing transmission among our non-infected patients. A team of providers, CMAs, and nurses were assembled with input from key stakeholders on how to combat this deficit. The aim of this project was to increase screening for HIV in the primary care setting for all patients ages 18 to 65, based on the revised USPSTF guidelines to 50% by March 9th, 2018. Tests of change utilized included regular staff meetings, reviewing guidelines, and discussing barriers to HIV screening. We also used shared decision-making tools to engage patients in their plan of care. Staff pre-screened the charts during pre-visit calls, identifying patients in need of screening, and the team utilized a checklist reviewing our process for HIV screening. We predicted that staff understanding and knowledge of HIV screening guidelines would increase by 50% from our baseline data, with targeted education sessions focused on 3 main categories: understanding of guidelines, comfort regarding HIV care, and understanding of the process of HIV screening. We predicted that patient perceptions of HIV screening would increase with a goal of 50% of patients reporting understanding of universal screening recommendations after utilization of our shared decision-making tool. We predicted that pre-screening patients during a pre-visit phone call would increase identification of patients eligible for HIV screening by 50%. And lastly, we predicted that utilization of a process checklist during the patient's visit would increase the number of signed orders for patients eligible for HIV screening by 30%. Our aim focused on enhancing documentation of the last HIV screen, which significantly increased compared to our baseline data. The effectiveness of our design allowed for us to adjust our overall goal after PDSA2 to 75%, which was a new goal we sustained for the duration of the project. The foundation of this project and its ongoing success was our team, comprised of CMAs, providers, and support staff who kept the project growing and developing throughout each cycle. Due to staff honesty, as well as their own suggestions and ideas, we were able to adjust and enhance the screening practice. Another strength that we identified during project implementation was our team's ability to pre-screen patients for eligibility during a pre-visit phone call. Although this ramp involved a lot of modification and adjustment, it allowed for the screening process to begin 1 to 2 days before the patient actually presented for the exam. Over the 8-week cycle, team engagement feedback demonstrated an increase to 100% understanding and knowledge. Utilization of the shared decision-making tool increased patient understanding of HIV screening to 83%. Pre-screening chart identified eligible patients at 69%, and utilization of a checklist during the patient visit allowed effective ordering of the HIV screen in 71% of eligible patients. Team involvement was foundational for the success of each ramp of this project, and the utilization of feedback from team engagement surveys allowed for adjustment in each ramp, furthering the success of the project. The shared decision-making tool was not only useful for patients during preventative exams, but by the end of the 4th cycle, it was incorporated into regular office visits. Incorporating risk assessment prior to the patient presenting for the visit proved efficient and helpful and resulted in unified documentation of the last HIV screen. Lastly, utilization of a process checklist resulted in ease of implementation from identification of risk factors to patient education and ordering of lab tests. The results of this project identified gaps in care, and not only were many patients eligible for HIV screening, but there was not a location within the EMR for documentation of the last screen date. Updates in HIV screening may often go overlooked due to stigma regarding HIV care, as well as a lack of time devoted to reviewing patient risk factors. To combat these barriers, our team developed changes to practice to complete screening for patients who may be at risk for HIV. As the project developed over time, it was recognized that the EMR was vital to the maintenance of this project, which is an important element when relaying our process implementation to other clinical locations. The multi-step approach, although initially complex, identified many patients needing screening. In disseminating our findings to other clinics, we anticipate that utilization of a strong team, as well as proper use of the EMR, are necessary for the framework of our project to be implemented. Reflecting back on these last 8 weeks, I'm grateful to work alongside providers and team members passionate about stopping the spread of HIV within our community. The teamwork and support from other providers, staff members, and workhorses of our team resulted in the success of the project. During recent review of project findings with my DMP site sponsor, I was encouraged to bring these findings to our population health team and hope to use the results of this project to hopefully add routine screening as a permanent component of our health maintenance EMR. This project was helpful in distinguishing myself as a DMP leader, and I've been asked to join an HIV care best practice committee to work towards enhancing standards of practice, including screening throughout our hospital system. Time.
Good job, Ann.
Thanks.
You had 44 seconds to spare. Good job.
Done.
Everybody notice John in the picture there?
I did. I like this.
He's a vital member of my team.
That wasn't me. That was
Great job. I'm so tingly over there. You guys all sound so awesome. All right. Who's next?
Awesome.
All right. So next up is Coral Bless.
Okay, I have to remember how to present again. You guys all hear me okay?
Yes.
Coral, you might want to turn your volume down just a bit. It feels like it might be a little loud.
On my computer.
Yeah, now it sounds fine.
Okay. My name is Coral Bress. I'm implementing risk screening for timely identification of abnormal glucose and achievement of right care in pregnancy at Lake Norman OBGYN. And this is a picture of our office. My aim is to increase early prenatal identification of patients at risk for GDM to achieve 65% right care by 90 days. Right care consists of a dietitian referral, a 1-hour glucose tolerance test placed, a 1-hour glucose tolerance test completed, and a 3-hour glucose tolerance test as needed. These are the providers at Lake Norman OBGYN. The plan changes are education with kickoff meeting, and orient to the risk factor tool and the shared decision-making tool. The shared decision-making tool is given a check-in for every patient less than 24 weeks. The MA is to collect the checklist and give to provider prior to the exam, and the logbook to be completed at the time of lab result review, and made to utilize that logbook to to create referrals. My predictions are I predict an 85% median in attendance rate for staff members and a little hesitation from all members of the staff due to the increased workload. I predict the SDM at the beginning of the visit will identify those risk factors earlier in the appointment that might streamline ordering those labs and initiating the glucola, hopefully while the provider is identifying those risk factors and documenting the checklist. Creating a logbook and completing entry at the time of the lab result review will increase that right care provided to patients with those risk factors. This presents the results of the staff attendance, which was consistent around the goal of 85%, especially after changing to brief in the morning biweekly meetings. The results of the shared decision-making tool maintained above a goal of 90%, majority of the project. However, that training of the new team members and starting another provider near the end of the project did cause a decrease in the SDMs completed. The results of the number of 1-hour glucose tolerance tests completed goal of 80% was only achieved twice during the project. This is one of my failures. And the right care slowly increased throughout the project with only minor setbacks, the median of 66%, which was just 1% above the goal of 65%. The summary of results was the staff attendance was consistent around the goal of 85%, really utilizing that shared decision-making tool, maintained above a goal of 90%. For majority of the project, but the training of new team members and started another provider near the end of the project did decrease that, cause a decrease in SDMs. And the number of 1-hour glucose tolerance tests completed was about 80%, was the goal of 80%, but it was only achieved, like I said, twice during the project. Really, the right care was the greatest achievement. Prior to implementation was only 4%, and now we got above the goal of 65%. I learned that the staff obviously preferred the biweekly AM brief meetings, and really the best time for patients to complete that shared decision-making tool was in the waiting room. This was crucial to give them the option of initiating glucola at the beginning of the visit to decrease the amount of time the patient was in the office, and obviously the second lab visit was eliminated. And the logbook was really important to keep track of our aim and create referrals as needed. The impact of systems is we're really trying to decrease the diagnosis of gestational diabetes later in pregnancy, decrease the risk of type 2 diabetes later in life, increasing education about lifestyle modifications, decreasing the risk of macrosomia, which decreases the risk of C-section deliveries, and risk of preeclampsia and pregnancy, and really just overall decreasing the healthcare costs and promoting healthier lifestyles. So the conclusion is our aim of right care increased by over 60% in just 3 short months time span. All of the ramps were supportive measures that helped achieve the goal of right care, starting with team members being on board with the project and attending meetings. The provider consensus median was at 87.5, and 91.5% of patients completed those SDMs prior to 24 weeks. Discussing the self-management goals for healthy lifestyles, and the provider consensus got to 100% as we reached the end of the cycle. The failures of the project were ordering the 1-hour glucose tolerance test and completing the 1-hour glucose tolerance test, which only had a median of 66%. This project is sustainable with the cooperation of all providers. The requirements is the encouraging and supporting providing support from the staff members to continue to implement that SDM and initiate the 1-hour glucose tolerance test. They really are the building blocks to help patients understand. Some of our barriers to change would be that it's increased provider time, increased MA time, additional healthcare costs for those normal 1-hour glucose tolerance tests. And the factors that promoted the success of the project were provider support, the use of the shared decision-making tool to really help create a conversation to promote healthier lifestyles. And I learned that to create change, there is many more details and work necessary than just being the change you want to seek, including having a motivated team on your side. My role as a leader is not one of my strengths, so I would have rather placed the burden on myself than try to talk to another team member to do the job that I created for them. However, I was able to overcome that thought by overthinking through the cycles, and the team ramp with biweekly changes. Thank you. And I do apologize, you guys, if you heard anything. I'm watching a dog, and they decided they wanted to go play in the living room. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're contained.
Well, it didn't come up in your voice. So
Okay, good.
That's
what got me a little distracted. Was I over?
No, you were. You had 19 seconds left. So good job. All right, Amanda, you want to go next? All right. Next up, Amanda Parker.
Okay.
While she's getting set up, you can see that, you know, some projects do great and other projects, despite our best efforts, don't reach our goals. But that's not what you need here. You just need to learn the process. Sometimes the failures teach us more than the successes.
Can you guys hear me okay and see my project?
Yep.
Yes.
Great, thank you. All right, I am ready. So my name is Amanda Parker, and my DNP project is titled Increasing HPV Vaccinations Through Patient-Centered Care in a Rural Women's Clinic in Indiana. I am a nurse midwife at Dearborn County Hospital, and my project aim is to increase the number of girls and women aged 12 to 26 who initiate the HPV vaccination series to 25% by March 9th, 2018. In a chart audit prior to the beginning of the project, it was found that our clinic performed poorly in the vaccination against human papillomavirus, or HPV. Only 10% of eligible patients were receiving the vaccine. In fact, only 70% of patients were even asked about their vaccine status at all. The planned test of change included teamwork, patient engagement, screening, and follow-up. Ramp A was teamwork. This involved implementation of staff meetings and huddles. These provided information and education regarding HPV, Gardasil, vaccination schedules and dosing, and potential side effects. Ramp B was patient engagement. This change was the introduction of a shared decision-making tool called IVAC HPV. Sorry about that. Sorry. Ramp C was screening. We started the use of new history intake form completed by the medical assistants and patients. Finally, Ramp D was follow-up. This involved the use of a logbook to track HPV doses given, thus making it easier to provide follow-up calls and vaccination. I initially predicted that my team would be engaged. I'm sorry, I've messed up. Oh no. I don't know what happened. Okay, I'm sorry.
Amanda, do you want to just start at the beginning?
Can I please? I'm so sorry.
Of course. No problem. Let me reset my timer. This is just for us.
I know, but I feel horrible. I'm sorry, you guys.
That's
I got
all right.
lost with my slides. Okay.
Easy to happen.
Yeah, I'm ready. So my DNP project is titled Increasing HPV Vaccinations Through Patient-Centered Care in a Rural Women's Clinic in Indiana. I am a nurse midwife in Dearborn County Hospital, and my project aim is to increase the number of girls and women aged 12 to 26 who initiate the HPV vaccination series to 25% by March 9th, 2018. In chart audit prior to the beginning of the project, it was found that our clinic performed poorly in the vaccination against human papillomavirus, or HPV. Only 10% of eligible patients were receiving the vaccine. In fact, only 70% of patients were even asked about their vaccine status at all. The planned test of change included teamwork, patient engagement, screening, and follow-up. Ramp A was teamwork. This involved implementation of staff meetings and huddles. These provided information and education regarding HPV, Gardasil vaccination schedules and dosing, and potential side effects. Ramp B was patient engagement. This change was the introduction of a shared decision-making tool called IVAC HPV. Ramp C was screening. We started the use of a new history intake form completed by the medical assistants and patients. And finally, Ramp D was follow-up. This involved the use of a logbook to track HPV doses given, thus making it easier to provide follow-up phone calls and vaccinations.
I initially predicted that my team would be engaged and would surely develop their confidence quickly. I hoped to reach 100%, reporting very confident or confident as rated on a Likert scale survey. I was worried that the small staff size would cause the team huddles to seem redundant. I originally predicted that the IVAC HPV tool would be used 100% of the time and lead to successful self-identification in 3 out of 4 patients. I predicted that a learning curve at first while incorporating the HPV IVAC tool into the standard appointment. In addition, I predicted that we could successfully identify eligible patients by the use of the new intake form. I thought that this would be the easiest part of the project because I had worked with IT to help change the form myself. I predicted that this would be the most difficult ramp, as I knew I was starting out with such a low population in which to call vaccine reminders. I hoped to reach a 50% follow-up vaccination rate, but I was admittedly most concerned about this and lost many hours of sleep to this worry. So what happened? Speaking to Ramp A, staff confidence slowly increased from 40 to 100%, answering 4 or 5, which is confident or very confident. This was achieved using weekly huddles, reminder emails, and posting information about the workspace. Ramp B was the most successful aspect of this project. Patient-correct self-identification following the use of the IVAC HPV tool remained consistent at nearly 100% for the duration of the project. New intake form usage was also consistent with mostly 100% completed intake forms. This shows that the intake forms allowed for the correct identification of eligible patients. Huddles were deemed effective as I would get a sharp increase following. During cycle 4, the second provider in the practice was added, and you can see the learning curve on this run chart towards the end. Follow-up vaccinations were the most variable result of this project. Initially, we did very well. However, we reached a midway slump. Changing the nature of the calls from just patients who were due for follow-up vaccines to include parents of unaccompanied minors and changing the time of the phone calls made this a success, with the median reaching the goal of 50%. Overall, our team did very well. Speaking to the aim, we went from a 10% to a 60% vaccination rate. The success of this project can aid other Dearborn County Hospital offices, including pediatrics, family practice, and OB-GYN. The Huddle shared decision-making tool, intake form, and logbook can be duplicated to make each office successful with increasing the uptake of the Gardasil vaccine. These inexpensive changes can lead to a rise in vaccination, which reduces the risk of HPV and the health consequences it can cause. This project was largely a success. Increasing the vaccination rate by 50% was over anything I could have imagined. I had great team support, which led to this success. The use of the new intake form led to an increase in eligible patients who received HPV. So what was the reality? For Ramp A, I saw small team improvements, but the 100% very confident rate was eluding me. The dosing schedule seemed to be the biggest issue. Finally, after reminder emails and posting the schedule everywhere, we had success. For Ramp B, I struggled with this at first. Changing who gave the form and when, and changing the location of the form helped tremendously. For Ramp C, I predicted that this would be relatively easy because I controlled the creation of the form. However, getting the staff to use the form was difficult at times. Visual reminders and the team huddles helped. For cycle 4, we added the second provider, so the usage did drop. For Ramp D, this prediction was right on. However, it was so much worse than I possibly could have imagined. I solved the low population problem by adding the last year of data instead of just the last 3 months, adding in parents of unaccompanied minors, and changing the time. I consider this project to be very sustainable. However, I obviously took on more roles than needed. I think that with proper delegation of follow-up phone calls, this is something that we will continue in my office. In addition, with continued diligence with the logbook and updating computer software to include the intake form on every new female patient, regardless of the reason for a visit, will help long-term. This project has changed the way I look at quality improvement. I have so much respect for those who have gone before me. In reflection, I feel like this has taught me that I can be a D&P leader. I am pretty capable. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Awesome. I love the picture.
Thank you. Yeah, she won an award for that picture, which I thought was really awesome.
Yeah, great. You had 30 seconds to spare.
Great. I'm sorry for I got ahead of myself. I'm sorry about that, you guys.
You know what? we've all been there or glad that it wasn't us. So
Sorry.
no big deal. All right. So Michelle or John? John? Okay. So next up, John Kim.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
And then can you see my presentation?
You can now, yes.
Okay. All right. My name is John Kim, and my quality improvement project is titled Implementing Vaccine Scripting Toolkit for Timely HPV Vaccination in Adolescents Age 11 to 12 in an Urban Clinic. So why HPV vaccinations? When I talked with the QI director about potential projects, he immediately told me to focus on HPV vaccinations because less than 40% of adolescents age 11 to 12 have received their first HPV vaccination at Carle Clinic. And this is a picture of the clinic that I work at in Champaign, Illinois. Now, the aim of the project is to achieve timely initiation of HPV vaccinations by 50% in patients aged 11 to 12 years old by March 9th, 2018. Now, for this project, I had 4 tests of change. The first test of change is team engagement through weekly meetings to increase team confidence scores. The second is patient engagement with the focus on engaging patients through the utilization of a shared decision-making tool. The third is screening with the focus on increasing the identification of patients needing their first dose of HPV vaccine. And the last test of change was creating a checklist with the focus on reminding providers to recommend the HPV vaccine to eligible patients. Now for predictions, I predict that weekly team meetings will increase team confidence of the project from a baseline of 55% to 90%. Utilizing a well-designed shared decision-making tool will increase patient engagement from a baseline of 25% to 50%. And for test of change number 3, pre-visit phone calls will be used to identify all eligible patients scheduled for annual physicals needing their first HPV vaccine. And I predict that 100% of eligible patients will be properly screened by the end of the project. And for the last test of change, through strategic reminders, checklists, and provider documentation in the EMR, it will be done 80% of the time by the end of the project. Now for the results, when it came to the first test of change, team confidence scores for the project were below the goal of 75% during the planning stages of the project. But after PDSA cycle number 1, team confidence scores exceeded the 75% confidence goal. And so the confidence goal was increased to 90%. By PDSA cycle number 3, weekly huddles were implemented instead of team meetings, which led to the 90% target confidence score goal being reached. For test of change number 2, patient engagement was difficult the entire project as the results showed that patient acceptance of HPV vaccination fluctuated above and below the goal of 50%. There's no significant correlation between this test of change and patient acceptance of HPV vaccination. Pre-visit screening phone calls were well within the 80% range by the end of PDSA cycle number 1. Therefore, the goal was increased to 100% for the rest of the cycles. The 100% goal was never reached, but by PDSA cycle number 4, 96% of eligible patients received a pre-visit screening phone call before their annual physical. By the end of PDSA cycle number 1, the goal of 50% of all checklists being completed was achieved. Starting from PDSA cycle number 2, the goal was increased to 80%, which was achieved by the end of PDSA cycle number 2, with the highest completion rate of 98% noted in PDSA cycle number 4. For summary results, team survey scores progressively improved all the way to the end of the QI project. And all eligible patients were engaged with the SDM tool by PDSA cycle number 3. But engagement, like I said before, did not lead to any significant changes in patients accepting the vaccine. Pre-visit phone calls met the target goal by PDSA cycle number 2, and checklists met the target goal in every PDSA cycle. For learning, 55% of the team had confidence in the HPV vaccine project before implementation, but through strategic weekly team meetings, confidence scores increased to 91% by the end of the project. I also learned the SDM tool was not as effective as predicted, even with adjustments made to the tool, as only 44% of patients accepted the vaccine by the end of the project. Pre-visit phone calls were consistent in all 4 PDSA cycles, with improvements made to the scripting for each cycle. Checklist completion, documentation, and vaccine acceptance refusal steadily improved, and it reached 91% by the end of the project. Now, for impact on systems, this project tested several approaches to increasing timely initiation of HPV vaccines in patients aged 11 to 12, which can help prevent over 28,000 HPV-related cancers and HPV-related diseases annually. Overall, team engagement had one of the biggest impacts on improving HPV vaccination rates, as each team member plays a significant role in implementing this kind of project. Pre-scripting phone calls, SDM tools, and checklist reminders are 3 successful tests of change that may be disseminated to other clinics worldwide. Some countermeasures of the project include potential staff dissatisfaction due to additional tasks and time commitment. The project was overall successful in increasing the initiation of HPV vaccines in eligible patients aged 11 to 12. This project is sustainable if staff continue to agree to continue with their current roles and responsibilities, if providers are willing to continue engaging patients through the SDM tool, and if staff members continue to document HPV vaccine data into the EMR to ensure that the project is meeting its goals. For reflection, open communication among all members of the team was significantly vital for the project to succeed. This was achieved through weekly meetings and transparent dialogue about what was going well and what was not. The biggest barrier to the project was the increased roles and responsibilities, as the team members and I were already busy with all our other responsibilities in the clinic. Overall, I learned that QI projects are not about perfect results, but progression towards the right direction. I didn't see the results that I hoped, but the project showed the potential of what can be done in healthcare with successful QI projects. And as I reflect back, there are many things that I would have done differently, but I'm thankful that I got this incredible experience. Thank you.
Great. You had 13 seconds left. And did anybody feel like he was just speaking slow? And I thought, oh, he'll never get done. And you did. So I guess sometimes we put too many words around something. I don't know, but you did great. So question, Emily, are you part of John's team?
So we work within the same clinic. I don't see as many of the pediatric patients. So some of my patient population was included, but he more so focused on providers that see more pediatric patients.
Okay.
So I didn't get, my picture was not in his presentation.
So he's part of your team, but you're not necessarily part of his.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a unique group of providers that are in primary care that also see HIV patients. It's a pretty small group of providers on my team. But there's a lot more like pediatricians that were involved in John's team for this project.
Okay, sweet. All right, good. All right, Michelle, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, I'll start the timer whenever you're ready. Next up, Michelle North.
Okay, can you guys hear me and see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Okay, my name is Michelle North, and I'm a certified nurse midwife and women's health nurse practitioner that works at New Femme Rejuvenation Clinic. And my DNP project was focused on improving patient-centered care by using a shared decision aid and standardized discharge and follow-up process. Choosing this topic was based on the need of improving patient safety, as well as the input from key stakeholders. New Femme Omaha opened in July 2017, and there was no standardized discharge or follow-up processes. Both of these could have prevented medication errors that were identified during the baseline data collection, as well as increasing patient-centeredness of care. The World Health Organization considers medication errors to be a global issue, and an estimated $3.5 billion is spent on treatment related to medication errors in the United States each year. Inadequate discharge of patients contributes to approximately 40% of these errors. This project included our operations director, myself, and then my site sponsor, John Olin, who is the other provider at the Omaha site, and then also our medical director and my medical assistant and treatment coordinator. The aim of this project was to increase the percentage of appropriate care to adult women at a female rejuvenation clinic to 95% by March 9, 2018. I predicted by the end of this project, employee satisfaction would be at greater than or equal to 90%. Our baseline data was 77. I predicted that patients would achieve 100% mean score on the patient confidence with decision-making survey. No baseline data was available for this as this was a new process. I predicted there will be a decrease in medication errors to less than 5%, and there will be a 90% increase in follow-up calls being completed. To meet these goals, I started off with staff education, which included staff meetings, one-on-one meetings, and daily huddles. Throughout the 8 weeks, many tests of change were completed. It started out by implementing a shared decision aid, discharge tool, and follow-up tool for our bioidentical hormone replacement patients. Once the initial tests of change were working well, we brought in the discharge and follow-up tools to all patients seen at NewFem. In order to keep the staff engaged, increase recognition by providing meals and foods or small tokens of appreciation, such as this one, which was our unicorn rose I purchased for everyone on Valentine's Day. By the end of implementation, employee satisfaction increased 20% and patient decision satisfaction improved 100%. Medication errors decreased from 20% to 0.7%. Follow-up calls were completed 100% of the time. The flow and efficiency of the practice was also improved, which decreased the amount of time patients were spending in the clinic. New patients saw a 21-minute decrease and existing patients an 8-minute decrease. The 3 components of right care, we included the use of a shared decision aid, discharge, and follow-up tools. Initially, there was a slow start to using the 3 components of right care, but once it was a part of our daily routine and one person was responsible for these forms, there was a significant increase in their usage. After a staffing change, the employee satisfaction was significantly increased, and then the implementation of staff recognition for contributions related to the project, it continued to rise. When the shared decision aid was changed from an emailed version that was sent to patients before their initial visit to a face-to-face version, it improved the uses of this tool tremendously. Throughout the process, I learned that team recognition and daily huddles are important ways to engage staff and increase satisfaction. The patient's experience of care was difficult to evaluate due to the minimal amount of surveys that were completed. The best way to have patients complete surveys or the shared decision made was face-to-face. The discharge and follow-up tools were effective when spread to all patients, and having one person responsible for placing these forms in the charts increased their completion rate. The project was significant on local systems by improving patient-centered care, decreasing medication errors, and increasing patient and employee satisfaction. The cost to making these changes was minimal, and the benefit to the system and the patients was significant. Other systems will benefit from the use of the shared decision aid completed face-to-face, as well as the standardized discharge and follow-up process to improve patient-centered care. The providers at other clinics are already interested in initiating the shared decision aid at their practice, and I'm meeting with one of them next week to discuss this. At the conclusion of this project, there were improvements in all outcome measures. The project is sustainable as it has support from management as well as a highly engaged staff. Daily huddles will ensure transparent feedback and a shared sense of systems needing improvement. Having the discharge and follow-up tools added to the existing workflow ensures completion and will decrease the amount of extra work. When patient-centered care is improved, patient satisfaction and safety, as well as employee satisfaction, was also improved. As I reflect on this process, I'm grateful for the key stakeholders and their support of this project. The barriers I encountered during this project were easily overcome thanks to the support of my team. Quality improvement is essential in the clinical setting, but will not change overnight. Team engagement is an integral part of the change process, and change cannot happen unless each person fulfills his or her role. After completing this project, I know I will not look at any problem in the clinical setting the same. And references. I was getting really close to being over, I think.
Oh, no, you had a whole minute to spare.
Oh, it felt like way longer.
No, it always seems that way when you're talking, but no, you had plenty of time. So good job. Everyone did great. So thoughts, feedback, debrief. How do y'all feel? And we lost Megan. She texted me that her computer died.
I loved it. I thought it was really cool to see everybody's completion because you follow through with everybody and you kind of get the gist of what's going on and how they're working to improve it. But it was nice to see like the photos of everything and nice to see the final result because I feel like, I don't know, I feel emotionally invested in everyone's project. So I'm pretty excited about everybody. I think it went really well. So I liked this project, the Petcha Kutcha thing. Yeah.
I think that because Coral and Michelle kind of joined after one semester, like I was much more familiar with everybody else's. And so it was nice to kind of see your project all in all and get like the full picture. I mean, I felt like I completely understood your projects from your presentation. You guys did a great job of explaining it from start to finish and kind of putting it all together from all the feedback we've been getting in our sessions was really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking about that when I was presenting because everybody was presenting. I was thinking to myself, like, man, that would be awesome to know what everybody was doing prior to. I mean, you kind of get a gist, but like maybe just a short presentation at the beginning, of, I don't know, before you start talking about all of it, so you remember. So I agree with you.
Well, this team was very generous to include Coral and Michelle, and the reception was warm and friendly.
Yes, so, thank you guys.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate that, it led to a little bit longer sessions this term, but I couldn't figure out how to do it without having 2 small sessions, which then you don't get the breadth of the projects either. So, but anyway, you were very tolerant of adding a couple extra folks, so I appreciate that. So,
thanks, guys.
Any other final thoughts? Believe it or not, next term, there aren't any group sessions. So as a group, you might decide to do a Hangouts once in a while to commiserate or, collaborate, that kind of thing. That is up to you entirely. But we took out, there was a Hangouts on Air appropriate use session where you looked at the appropriate use of resources, but because the course is going from 4 credits down to 2, that was one of the assignments that got axed out of it. And so the only presentation or group thing are your final presentations. And I encourage you early in the term, sign up for when you want to do your final presentation. It should be, I think it's going to be week 8 is when we move those 2. And if there's a special time that your team routinely meets, then by all means, don't put yourself in that box. We want you presenting to your team and doing your final presentations to them, but it's a big blue button session that the greater Frontier community is invited to. And one of the requirements is you have to get some of your peers to attend. So I hope you guys look at those schedules early and block some time to show up and support each other for your final presentations. I think it'd be a shame to miss that if I were you. So anyway, because that's it. That's the finish line once you do those final presentations. So anyway, you guys are 1 term away. A very, very short 11 weeks left. So
I know, it's crazy. It's gone so fast.
It does go fast.
It goes so fast.
I feel like this term was so much better than the one before it, for sure.
I told Amanda when I graded her PDSA, I said, you didn't even cry once this term.
I know. Like last term, I was a hot mess. I'm telling you, like weekly phone calls to Dr. Slager saying, I'm so stressed. I don't know what to do. So I'm so glad. Like I didn't cry much. So I feel pretty good.
That's all right. Michelle told me she was going to quit at least 10 times. So.
It is true. It is.
You
really
didn't show
true.
that at all.
It's been a really difficult term because I haven't been feeling very well. But well, this is like secret, but you guys don't know any of our family, but we're expecting our 6th baby. So yay. And I have hyperemesis, so that's super fun. Try to with all this stuff. But yeah, so don't tell anybody because not even our kids know yet. But
Cone of
What
silence.
do you do then? Are you due before the end of next term?
yeah, unfortunately, right around graduation.
Okay,
So
yeah, duh. Hello.
Oh, in October.
we were, well, I'm due the beginning of November, but graduation is end of October. But you guys should all come because it is probably the last graduation in Hayden.
Yeah.
So if you guys are Frontier, like root people, you know, it's going to be a really important graduation. And I'll need midwives there because I'm planning on being there. It's a 14-hour drive for me. So well, hopefully no baby will come while we're there.
Oh man, are you going to be swollen or what?
Yeah, but I mean, if you're gonna travel 14 miles away, I mean, that is probably the best place to travel to. There's lots of midwives there.
Yeah.
Have you
It's
been
like,
there? Oh my God.
it's like, well, I mean, at graduation, it's like the
Mecca
founding
midwives.
midwifery. Yeah, like that's where people come to pray to the midwifery gods. So,
And I'm sure they
feel
would ring the bell in celebration of your baby being delivered.
Yeah.
we would bring it for that baby.
Well, I do have one child that learned how to walk while I was on campus for midwifery bound. So,
Oh, that was nice of them.
Like completing the loop.
Aw, that's
You
so
know, as
exciting.
midwives, we participate in so many momentous occasions, but in exchange, we miss some milestones
Oh yeah.
of our own. So,
Yep.
Yep.
That's why I moved to be 4 minutes from my hospital, because the final straw was when I missed my son's last baseball game 2 years ago, and I was so sad. So now I live literally, I could see the hospital from my back door, and that's nice. So I recommend it.
all right. Well, I don't need to keep you any longer. You all are fabulous. Don't be strangers next term. Okay. So
And
be
see
sure
you in October.
I'm sure I'll see Amanda Parker in some kind of group next term. We always tease because we have the same close last name and we live, so we always get in the same groups.
And we
We're
know
like-
Emily and John will see each other.
Yes, because they work together.
I need to drive over and see you guys, you know, because it's like right there. I do have a question, and this is going to make me sound stupid. Stupider. When is the start of this term? This next term? Do we get a week off, or do we get 2 weeks off? Two.
So
okay.
Like April 9th, I think.
Yep.
April 9th. Okay.
Next week is week 11, and then you have 2 weeks off.
For some reason, I was thinking April 2nd, but that
Nope.
works. Thank you. That's it. That's all I had.
That wasn't
right.
stupid. You're not stupid.
Anybody have to take health policy next term?
Yeah.
Yeah. How is that?
Megan.
That's the one we signed up for, right? Yes, I think I'm taking that class. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it goes. I mean, it's a 2-credit course, so it can easily be done with the dissemination course. So.
Hey, compared to this.
I'm taking educator right now, and I tell you, this giant clinical teaching plan due the same day as this Petcha Kutcha thing has not been fun. No. I have like so many PowerPoints going on my laptop right now. I don't even know what to do with it all, but it'll be fine. I'll be done after tonight. I'm doing my reflection tonight.
Well, there was some method to the madness for faculty too, because we used to have everything due at the end of week 11, and then we got to grade over the break. So, so we bumped that up too. So we actually get the break. I mean, administratively we don't, but
that's
kind
nice,
of like
though.
working in your office when all the patients leave. You know, you can get accomplished. So, Megan, welcome back.
Thank you. It was really hard finishing the project on Sunday and doing PDSA 4 and everything, and then having Monday and Tuesday to prepare for this. But yes, my computer just for real died, not like dead battery, like it's dead. So
Oh no.
yeah, so glad that I emailed myself my stuff earlier.
Oh,
But I'm on my phone. I made it work.
look at you.
Did you do your presentation from your phone?
No, I did my presentation on my computer, and then midway of this webinar, my computer went.
Coral's dog.
That was perfectly timed with your like thumb down. It was like.
I don't think that was me, but that was perfect.
It was. It was like perfect timing. I really liked that. Good work there.
All right. Well, promise me to do something fun during the break, okay?
I sure will.
Send me a picture. You have to send me an email picture of you doing something fun during the break, okay?
I can do that.
Done.
Make it G-rated though.
Good one. Good one. That's a well-timed joke right there. Well-timed.
All right.
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good break.
Bye, guys.
Bye.